Hey guys, tonight we're heading back to the 14th century, to a world of cobbled streets, leaning timber-framed houses, and more rats than you'd think one city could handle. Imagine walking through a foggy medieval alley, the kind where your boots squelch with things you'd rather not identify. Something skitters past your foot. It's not a cat. It's got a long tail, gleaming eyes, and it's got friends. Lots of them. You're in a city where rats aren't just a nuisance. They're part of the infrastructure. Now, you might think, well, how bad could it be? Let's just say if you don't trip over a loose stone, you'll likely trip over a rat dragging half a turnip. Sanitation? Optional. Sewers? Mostly decorative. And every shadow? Potential whiskered ambush. You're living in a time before germ theory, where illness is blamed on bad smells, unbalanced humors, or maybe your neighbor's suspicious mole. Meanwhile, the real culprits, fleas hitching rides on rodents, are multiplying underfoot. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you're still awake, drop your location and local time in the comments. I love seeing where you're all tuning in from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You trudge through the morning slop of a 14th century city. Paris, maybe, or Florence, or York. The names change, but the stench? Unmistakable. Wooden buildings lean into each other like gossiping crones. Dark windows blinking as chimney smoke curls across the rooftops. Market stalls creak into place. Chickens cluck. And beneath it all, an invisible rustling. The rats are up. They're everywhere. Beneath floorboards, nibbling through grain sacks, scaling beams like tiny daredevils. You see one balancing on a slanted roof tile, staring down like a furry gargoyle. Another darts past a butcher's stall, snags a chunk of meat, and vanishes into a drainpipe. Historians still argue whether rats were truly feared or simply tolerated back then. Some records suggest people saw them as part of the urban ecosystem. Gross, yes, but not necessarily alarming. It's not like anyone was running around screaming, "Plague rat!" in 1320. Not yet, but the numbers were growing. Part of the issue? Trade. Cities on major routes, like Genoa or Venice, were bursting with imported goods, bustling docks, and rodent stowaways. Grain shipments from Asia, cloth bales from Egypt, spices from India. Every crate, every sack, every bundle of dried figs might as well have been a little rat Airbnb. And they were smart. Rats adapted. They learned human schedules, knew when the baker tossed scraps, avoided certain doors and learned to open others. Medieval chroniclers didn't always document them directly, but you see the clues: complaints about spoiled food, gnawed manuscripts, or mysterious holes in pantry walls. You pass by a small church where a notice is nailed crookedly to the door. Something about rising rat bites among the children. It's written in Latin, of course, so unless you're literate, congrats if you are, because most weren't. It might as well be a menu. There's a popular belief that rat infestations were just worse in the poorer neighborhoods. Not true. Rats loved wealth. More food, more hiding spots, more luxurious hay. You walk past a merchant's house with carved oak shutters. And guess what's scuttling out from under it? Yep, he's wearing a grape. One chronicler in Lubeck, his name's lost, wrote of a night when the rats were so loud under the floorboards, he thought demons were clawing their way up. Turned out it was just 37 rats fighting over a chicken bone, which, to be fair, is pretty demonic. And yet, nobody quite knows how to get rid of them. You see, the city you're in is bursting at the seams. Population's growing, buildings go up faster than rules to keep them clean. There are no standardized trash pickups, no sewer inspections, and definitely no pest control hotline. What you have is a community collectively shrugging and going, well, guess that's just how things are now. But underneath that shrug, quiet panic. Because people are starting to notice. More rats means more sickness. And more sickness, well, we'll get to that. Tonight, though, you find a quiet corner. Maybe an upper floor above a bakery, warm from the ovens below. You sit near the window, watch the fog roll in, and listen. The city's quieter now, but that rustling never quite stops. It never really will. You wake to the clang of church bells and the unmistakable aroma of hot bread wafting from the bakery below. Sounds peaceful, right? But step outside and you're quickly reminded that peace is a luxury few cities afford in the 14th century, especially ones with a rat problem. The streets are alive, not with the bustle of carts or chatter of merchants, though those exist, but with the subtle symphony of rot. Chamber pots dumped from windows splash into narrow gutters. Rotten cabbage, fish heads, and chicken bones pile in alley corners. A goat sniffs around, unimpressed. Rats, however, they're having the time of their lives. This isn't a brief lapse in cleanliness. It's urban design by default. Medieval cities weren't built for sanitation. They were built to cram as many people and stalls and horses into a wall-ring space as humanly possible. Waste disposal? That's future use problem. Or more likely, some unfortunate apprentices. So you walk carefully, avoiding puddles you don't want to identify. And as you glance into an open doorway, you see a child tossing food scraps onto the street. Cheerfully, casually, as if helping the world along. Which, in a sense, he is. Helping the rat world. Historians still debate whether people understood the link between filth and disease back then. There were definitely city laws about waste. You weren't supposed to dump offal near the well, for example, but enforcement? Spotty at best. And sometimes the laws themselves were baffling. One London ordinance forbade throwing fish guts into the Thames unless it was before Vespers, because apparently after-hours entrails were particularly offensive. Still, cities tried. A few had muck collectors, basically freelance shovelers who would cart waste outside the walls. But these workers were underpaid, overworked, and frequently blamed for smells they didn't cause. And sometimes, when the waste piled up faster than it could be removed, it was quietly pushed into a neighbor's yard. Or buried. Or just left. You round a corner and find a dead pig slumped against a wall. No one seems alarmed. A dog sniffs it and trots off. The pig's belly twitches, until you realize it's not the pig. It's the movement underneath. A rat colony, maybe 20 strong, eating breakfast. Here's the thing about rats. They thrive where humans discard. And in the 14th century, discard means everything. Bones, crusts, tallow drippings, cheese rinds, stale beer. Rats weren't scavengers, they were connoisseurs. And medieval cities were their buffet. And because of all this, rat sightings weren't unusual. They were expected. You could find them in your pantry, your shoe, your bed. There's even a record from a Florentine notary whose ink pot was chewed through by a rat mid-document. The resulting stain is still visible in the archive, like a tiny rodent autograph. But what's wild is how normalized it was. People would simply write around the stain, or move to a different chair, or trap the rat and throw it in the stew pot. Waste not, want not. One monk in Prague even kept a rat as a pet. Named it Christoph. Swore it helped him stay awake during long scripture readings. Though honestly, it probably just wanted his biscuit crumbs. Rats were resourceful, too. They'd burrow under latrines, nest in firewood, chew through doors. Some found their way into grain silos, an early prototype of all-you-can-eat. One Venetian merchant reportedly opened a sack of rice to find a rat and 6 babies curled up inside. He screamed, then shrugged, then sold the rice anyway. And while you might think these cities were all suffering the same fate, some were worse than others. Paris, for instance, had miles of winding alleys with no natural drainage. Rain turned everything into a putrid soup. London, meanwhile, had a river great for trade, but also great for tossing things into, including things that shouldn't be tossed, like the contents of privies, or plague victims. You step aside as a cart rolls past, leaking something dark. A man with a broom shuffles behind it, half-heartedly sweeping. A rat scampers by with what looks like a cherry tart in its mouth. Probably stolen, possibly cursed. The sheer volume of edible trash meant rat populations exploded in urban areas. Some cities tried building raised wooden walkways to keep people off the ground. It worked, sort of, until the rats figured out how to climb them. And they always figured it out. So now, as you stand in the shadow of a Gothic spire, breathing in the very essence of garbage, you start to wonder, did people really think they were winning this war? Historians still argue whether the problem was denial or desperation. Maybe both. Maybe the rats were just too good at hiding, and people were too good at pretending they didn't see them. You move on, stepping over a cat pawing at a sewer grate. Its tail twitches with frustration. There's something down there. You hear it too. A scrape, a squeak, a tiny empire growing in the dark. You don't see the cats at first. Not until you look up and notice one perched on a sloped thatch roof, tail flicking, eyes locked on something in the alley. Another darts across your path, chasing a blur of fur. For a moment, you think maybe this city's got it figured out. Cats versus rats. Classic, elegant, natural. Except, it's not working. That flicking tail on the rooftop? The cat's watching, but it isn't pouncing. This well-fed may be lazy, or maybe it's just overwhelmed. Because the rats, they've got numbers and strategy, and they're not afraid of a few sleepy felines. So the city turns to reinforcements. You pass by a man in rough wool trousers, holding what looks like a small, squirming weasel on a leash. It's not a pet. It's a polecat, a kind of ferret's scruffier cousin. They're fast, fearless, and excellent at diving into holes to flush out rats. People even kept them in their sleeves. Yes, actual live ferrets in actual medieval sleeves. Welcome to 14th century pest control. Ferrets and polecats were the elite assassins of the rat world. Quick, sharp teeth, willing to go where cats wouldn't. A few cities even funded ferret handlers to walk the streets at night, like a weird mix of pest patrol and street magician. You imagine them crouching beside bakeries, whispering, "Go get 'em, Fluffy," and waiting for a victorious squeal. Historians still argue whether this was common or just a few colorful exceptions, but enough records exist, especially in Italy and Flanders, to suggest ferret deployments were a real thing. Unfortunately, they had limits. Ferrets got tired, distracted, occasionally stolen. One Parisian record notes a ferret gone missing for 3 days before returning with a wounded paw and a chunk of sausage. He was immediately rehired. But not everyone trusted animals to do the job. Some tried more creative methods. You reach a small square where a man is leaning against a wall, showing off a strange contraption. A wooden box with a swinging door, baited with cheese. Rat traps, medieval edition. Most were crude. Bait, stick, string. But some were elaborate spinning wheels, weighted lids, even tiny guillotine blades. You try not to picture that one too vividly. Still, the results were mixed. Rats are clever. Too clever, sometimes. They learned which traps to avoid. Some watched their kin get caught, then found ways to steal the cheese anyway. One German chronicle claims rats taught each other by example, like tiny, furry professors. Is that true? Hard to say, but you've seen how quickly they adapt. So cities escalated. They started organizing public hunts. Town criers would shout announcements. Rat Day, Tuesday, bring your dogs. Everyone showed up, kids, farmers, ex-soldiers, even monks. They'd chase rats through markets with sticks and nets. It was festive, a little dangerous, and usually ended with someone falling into a barrel. You duck as a net flies overhead. Today might be one of those days. By mid-afternoon, the alley behind a tavern smells like beer and panic. A dozen men are stomping and shouting while a rat darts under a cart. A dog lunges, misses. A boy yells, "Got it!" and holds up something wiggling. It's not a rat. It's someone's wig. These efforts, well-meaning though they were, didn't do much. For every rat caught, 10 more scurried out of sight. They nested faster than the city could respond. And every attempt at containment only revealed new cracks in the system. Take this corner shop, for example. It sells dried figs and lentils. The owner swears he's rat-free. But as you peek inside, you notice something odd. A burlap sack moving, just a little. You edge closer. Tiny chew marks line the bottom seam. A head pops out, stares at you, and disappears like a guilty thought. There's something both absurd and terrifying about it. Cities were trying, genuinely, but they were losing a war they barely understood. They blamed the rats, of course, but also the food sellers, the foreigners, the witches, anyone who didn't sweep their doorstep regularly. And then there's the politics. Some cities passed laws forcing bakers to keep cats. Others find people for feeding stray animals, worried that rats might share the scraps. In a few German towns, children were paid by the tail, a rat tail, that is. You imagine schoolyards echoing with arguments like, "That's my rat. You just found the tail." But here's the kicker. For all the chaos, rats weren't even the real villains. Not entirely. The true enemy? Fleas. Tiny, invisible stowaways, clinging to fur, leaping to skin, spreading something unspeakable. You don't know that yet, though. Not in the 14th century. All you know is that the rats are winning, and the city is getting desperate. You find yourself in the middle of a workshop. Narrow, smoky, cluttered with traps, boxes, and the unmistakable smell of damp fur. Hanging from the low ceiling are strings of what look like dried rat tails. A trophy collection? A ledger system? You decide not to ask. Welcome to the world of professional rat catchers. In 14th century cities, where rats had become more than just background pests, they were practically citizens. Some clever souls found a way to monetize the madness. Enter the Guild of Rat Catchers. Yes, a real profession, often freelance, occasionally recognized by city officials, always underpaid. You follow one of them, a wiry man with 2 teeth and a sharp grin, as he prowls the alleys with a burlap sack, a metal cage, and a dog the size of a cabbage. The dog's name is Biscuit. Biscuit is having a blast. The rat catcher whistles tunelessly, dips his hand into his pouch, and flings a crust into the corner. Wait, squeak, snap, one down. He grins at you like he's just caught a king. Historians still argue whether these men were respected or reviled. Some records show cities awarding small stipends for vermin control. Others suggest rat catchers were shunned, lumped in with gravediggers and leech collectors. One London law prohibited rat catchers from entering public baths. Apparently, no one wanted fleas in the steam. But that didn't stop the trade. Cities couldn't afford to. Some even offered bounties. Rat tails turned in for coin. In Prague, a clever man brought in 1,000 tails in a week. People started asking questions. Turned out he'd been breeding the rats himself. The city refused to pay, but he kept the rats anyway. Your new friend, the rat catcher, gestures to a long wooden pole with a loop of twine on the end. "Rat hook," he says proudly. "Also good for eels." As you follow him into a bakery storeroom, he crouches near a stack of flour barrels and whistles. Biscuit perks up. Then you hear it rustling behind the sacks. The rat catcher winks, then lunges. There's chaos. Sack tips over. Flour clouds the air. Biscuit barks. The rat catcher emerges covered in white dust, triumphant. In his hand, one very confused rat. You laugh. You can't help it. He laughs too, coughing on flour. "They're smart," he says. "But I'm smarter." He puts the rat in the cage. The rat immediately starts chewing the bars. The guild, if it can be called that, is more of a loose network. They share tips, territories, favorite baits. Some swear by old cheese. Others use honey or bits of salted fish. One Parisian document mentions a rat catcher who used tiny pieces of almond cake, claiming rats had noble taste. He also wore a velvet hat and charged double. You walk through the marketplace later and see one rat catcher performing tricks, making his trained rat walk a tightrope. It's a crowd pleaser. A child claps. A noblewoman shrieks. The rat bows. It's a strange relationship, really. Rats were hated, sure, but also familiar. You knew they were in your walls, your cellars, your beds. They were impossible to fully destroy, so you settled for managing them, like unruly tenants. There's a story told in Naples of a rat catcher who claimed to speak rat tongue. He'd sit in dark corners and whisper to them. "Come out, my little brothers," he'd say. No one ever saw him catch anything, but people paid him anyway, because somehow the rats did seem quieter when he was around. Could be a coincidence, or maybe not. Historians still debate whether this guild ever had formal codes. Some say yes. A charter from Ghent even outlines humane rat disposal, though what counted as humane is unclear. Others argue it was pure freelance chaos. Every catcher for himself, dogs and ferrets included. What's clear is that cities relied on them, even if they pretended not to. You pass a church notice board where someone scrawled, "Rat men wanted. Pay fare. Cheese provided." Is half torn, possibly chewed. And the problem? Even the best rat catchers couldn't keep up. For every 20 rats caught, 100 more were born. Catchers started marking houses with chalk. An R for infestation, a star for recent removal. Over time, entire streets were covered in faded sigils, like a strange, dirty constellation. The rat catcher bids you farewell at sundown. Biscuit pants happily. The cage rattles. Somewhere, a bell tolls. You look around and realize nothing has really changed. The rats are still here. Always were. Always will be. They just let you pretend otherwise. It begins at the docks. You wander down past the warehouses, the masts, the idle cranes creaking over low-tide sludge. The scent is unmistakable brine, wood rot, and something less describable but undeniably alive. Trade is the bloodstream of the city, pulsing in and out with barrels, spices, wool, olives, and uninvited passengers. You see a ship pulling in from the eastern Mediterranean, its hull lined with barnacles and mystery. Dockworkers shout, ropes strain, pulleys groan, and down the gangplank comes a crate, a scurry, a flicker, a flash of gray under the nearest sack of barley. The rat has arrived. By the 14th century, cities were starting to suspect their harbors were more than just trade zones, they were infection points. Goods weren't the only thing moving across oceans. You were importing fleas. And not just any fleas, Xenocilla chiopes, the kind that carried something lethal. Historians still debate whether port officials fully understood this connection. Quarantine rules existed as early as the late 1300s. Venice, notably, imposed a quaranta giorni, a 40-day isolation period for ships. It sounds smart until you realize it only applied after symptoms appeared. By then, the rats had already scurried ashore, their little legs full of fleas, their fleas full of nightmares. You watch as dock guards poke around lazily with spears, inspecting sacks for mold but never for motion. No one's checking crates for nests, no one's lifting floorboards. The city's defenses are a theatrical performance, and the rats are seasoned critics. One sailor, red-eyed, coughing, tries to bribe his way through inspection. "Just pepper," he says. The official nods. He doesn't notice the burlap twitch. You follow the crate into the city. It's loaded onto a donkey cart, trundled past the customs house, straight into the spice market. No one sees the rat leap off the back. No one hears the whisper of straw as it vanishes under a stall. And just like that, it begins. Cities tried to seal their borders, but they were fighting an invisible war. The idea of quarantine was radical. Keeping ships idle for over a month was expensive, frustrating, and deeply unpopular. Merchants protested. Priests prayed. Rats didn't care. You pass a notice painted on a warehouse door. No foreign cargo to be touched before cleansing. Below it, a smaller line reads, "Cleansing equals airing in the sun." Below that, someone has scrawled, "What if it rains?" The policies changed city by city. Dubrovnik built lazarettos, stone quarantine islands. Milan bricked up infected houses entirely, which, grimly, sometimes meant sealing families in alive. Marseilles tried burning ships. Genoa banned funerals altogether. And yet, the plague rolled on. You arrive at a makeshift checkpoint outside the city walls. A guard waves a stick and asks where you've come from. Before you can answer, he sneezes, then waves you through. This wasn't precision, it was pageantry. A sort of medieval security theater, where officials barked orders while rats darted between their feet. Historians still argue whether these cities were genuinely negligent or simply overwhelmed. The records show a scramble. Ordinances drafted and redrafted. Laws issued one day and broken the next. In one German port, sailors were ordered to strip naked and bathe before entry. Within a week, most had stopped. The river was cold. And besides, the rats didn't have to bathe. Some tried more symbolic gestures. In one bizarre case, a mayor declared a public rat exorcism, marching through town with incense and monks chanting psalms. The rats, naturally, watched from rooftops, There were also accusations. Foreign traders were blamed. Pilgrims, Jewish communities, women with too many cats, anyone who stood out. Fear makes logic optional. And so cities fell back on the one tactic they'd always used: borders. Close the gates, shut the ports, pretend nothing gets in. You stand at the city wall now, watching another ship dock in the distance. A bell tolls, a door slams, a rat disappears into a crack in the stones. The gates may be shut, but the plague has already slipped inside. It starts with a cough, a short, wet burst from a man unloading flour near the fishmonger's lane. You barely notice, people cough all the time in these cities. Smoke, dust, the chill that never seems to leave your bones. But this one doesn't stop. The next day he's gone. The day after, 3 more. Then the church bells start. Not the usual calls to mass or prayer. These are slower, heavier, tolling for the dead. You find yourself following a wagon. Wooden, rickety, its wheels crusted with dried mud and something darker. 2 men pull it slowly through the market square. They shout something you can't quite hear over the wind. Sounds like a chant. Closer now. Bring out your dead. It's happening. The Black Death is here. No one knows exactly how or when. But suddenly, the rats are not just a nuisance. They're an omen. A warning with whiskers. Fleas carried the plague bacterium Yersinia pestis from rodent to human. And the rats were everywhere. Still are. You pass an apothecary stuffing herbs into cloth sachets, handing them out like candy. Wear it near your heart, she whispers to each customer. It keeps the bad air out. No one mentions the rat scurrying behind her shelf. Historians still debate whether rats were solely responsible or if the fleas jumped to other animals once inside the city. What's certain is the disease spread fast, too fast. One day, the baker's boy is whistling in the alley. The next, he's pale, swollen, and silent. The city begins to panic. People flee, or try to. You pass a family loading a cart with blankets and salted meat. A cat darts between their legs. Don't let the rats come with us, the father mutters. But of course they do. Inside the walls, the mood shifts. Doorways are marked with chalk symbols. Entire houses go quiet. Rumors swirl like fog. Don't drink well water. Burn your clothes. Avoid the north gate. It's cursed. You hear someone say it started with the ships. Another swears it came from pigs. Someone else blames the night air. No one blames the rats directly, not yet, but they're watching them differently now. Warier, as if somehow the animals know what they've done. You step into a church and see something that makes you pause. Rows of candles, flickering in silence, and in the corner, a small painting. It shows a rat, painted almost reverently, next to a skull. Beneath it, the words, "Memento mori," remember that you will die. Even the clergy are spooked. A friar coughs behind you. You decide to leave. Outside, the corpse cart has gathered more passengers. A woman wails softly, clutching a loaf of bread to her chest. A child watches from a window, eyes wide and unblinking. Below her, a rat scampers through a puddle of something red. The city starts to change. Bells toll more often. Merchants close their stalls. People carry nosegays, bundles of herbs, up to their faces, breathing through them like masks. The smell of burning fills the air. Not incense, not wood, clothes, bedding. Hey, people start burning everything they can. You pass a man shoveling dirt into a trench. For the overflow, he says flatly. Churchyards are full. He wipes his brow. A rat watches from a tree branch. The fear is quiet, but constant. You feel it in how people flinch from each other, in the way doors shut a little too fast, in the sudden silence of the taverns. Some blame punishment from God. Others say the stars are misaligned. One man is convinced it's the frogs. You hear him yelling about it while waving a spoon. But you know what you've seen. You've seen the alleyways, the nests, the gnawed sacks and crawling fleas. You've seen the rats, and they're still here. They don't die like the people do. They vanish, sure, but only for a while. Then they return. Fat, fast, breeding. You find a quiet rooftop to watch the sun set. But even here, there's movement in the chimney flue. A soft squeak. A flicker of fur. The plague has begun its parade through the streets. And the rats? They're marching right beside it. The fire starts at dawn. You blink awake to the sound of shouting, with splintering, and a low, hungry roar. Flames crackle from a thatched rooftop 2 streets away. Smoke curls against the sky like a dark banner unfurling above the city. You run toward the noise, but not too fast. You know better than to rush toward a crowd in panic. By the time you reach the square, a group of men are pouring buckets of water onto the flames, but it's mostly symbolic. The fire isn't meant to be stopped. It's meant to be cleansing. Someone has set this house ablaze on purpose. The reason? A dead man was found inside, and no one wanted to risk it. Better ash than plague, says one woman, clutching a chicken under her arm like it's an emotional support animal. Another mutters about rat curses. Historians still argue whether these fire policies were effective or just performative. Some cities claimed burning infected houses could purify the air, since they believed disease was carried on foul smells. But while they were busy torching homes, the rats, ever practical, were simply running to the next street. You turn the corner and see a group of children stamping out a small fire with damp rags. Their faces are streaked with soot. Behind them, a man stands beside a pile of bedding and books, all doused in vinegar, then set ablaze. You ask him why. He shrugs. The priest said fleas die in fire. Then, almost to himself, he adds, "I think the rats just laugh at us." In London, records describe entire neighborhoods razed in waves. Not just plague houses, but everything nearby, shops, tenements, even bakeries. In Florence, they went further, burning clothes, bodies, carts, anything remotely suspicious. If it touched someone ill, it burned, including letters, including money, including records. You peek into the city hall, where a clerk is hurriedly tossing scrolls into a brazier. "Too risky to sort," he says, not looking up. The parchment smells strange. The rat under his desk disagrees. It waits until he turns his back, then drags a singed piece of cheese out from beneath a filing cabinet. This is the strange irony of the 14th century's rat war. In trying to destroy the evidence of disease, people also destroyed the evidence of their lives. Baptism records, marriage contracts, guild logs, charters, burned for safety, lost forever. And the rats? They survived just fine. Some people went further. You hear about a bishop who ordered his entire cathedral floor scrubbed with a solution of ash, vinegar, and rose water. To discourage rodent spirits, he reportedly said. The rats returned by week's end. You find yourself helping carry buckets to a bakery near the square. It hasn't caught fire, but its neighbor has. You pass them hand to hand, wooden, leaking, heavy. It's exhausting, pointless probably, but it feels like doing something. The baker nods in thanks. His wife is sweeping charred breadcrumbs out the back door when she yelps. A rat, just one, small, black, watching. It doesn't run. You think about that as the sun rises, as the smoke thins, and as the square begins to settle. The fire didn't stop the spread. It just made everyone more nervous. One man stands in the middle of the street, soot-streaked and mumbling. "They live in the walls," he says to no one. "The rats will bury us, and then dance on the ashes." You're not sure if he's wrong. By nightfall, the city smells like vinegar and smoke. Every doorway is damp, every window shuttered. But in the silence, the faintest sound echoes through the walls. A soft, scratching rustle. It's not the wind. It's never the wind. The bells ring again. Not for the dead this time, but for something else entirely. A warning. A call. You step into the square and hear the high, strained voices of church singers, echoing off stone. The tones are uneven, almost panicked. In the tower above, the bell ringer pulls harder than usual. The chimes clang fast and wild. You're not alone in feeling confused. "Is there a fire again?" someone asks. "A flood?" says another. "No," a third whispers. "It's the rats. They're in the cathedral." Of course they are. You push through the crowd gathered outside the church. The wooden doors hang open. Inside, the scent of incense mixes uneasily with mildew and fur. Priest is shouting in Latin. You don't catch much, but the gist is clear. God is displeased. Something unclean walks among them. And then you see them, dozens of rats swarming beneath the pews, over the altar steps, into the shadowy spaces behind tapestries. One bold fellow perches on the rim of the holy water basin. You lock eyes. It blinks. In the medieval mind, this isn't just infestation, it's sacrilege. Holy places were meant to be untouched by the base dirt of city life. Yet here are rats, treating the cathedral like their personal hideaway. Historians still debate whether churches really became overrun during plague years, or if the chroniclers exaggerated for drama. But contemporary drawings do show rodents in pulpits, gnawing on hymnals. One especially famous woodcut shows a priest chasing a rat with a thurible, swinging incense smoke like a weapon. The logic was both symbolic and practical. If the disease was sent by God as punishment, then rats, filthy, stubborn, prolific, might be the messengers. Not just pests but omens. Hence, bells. Bells were rung to frighten off bad airs and malevolent spirits. In some towns, they rang them at every hour, day and night. The idea was that sound might chase away sickness the way dogs chase cats, or the way cats were supposed to chase rats. You can imagine how well that worked. Still, the people clung to rituals. Priests waved censers at cellar doors. Monks sprinkled salt on floors. A bishop in Cologne even blessed an entire sewer line. A few weeks later, it collapsed. You visit the smaller chapels outside town, wooden, crooked little buildings barely big enough for a family. And you find the same pattern. Rats in the rafters. Rats in the offering bowls. One priest leaves out bread intentionally, hoping to appease the vermin saints. Yes, those were real, or at least believed in. In Germany, villagers prayed to Saint Gertrude of Nivelles to ward off rats and mice. Her icon showed her holding a book, while rodents frolicked at her feet. You see one such painting in a side chapel. Someone's drawn a mustache on her. The rats, of course, ignore it. The bells keep tolling. At night, the sound fills the city with a strange rhythm. Bong pause. It's meant to be reassuring. A promise that someone's watching, that someone's still trying. But to your ears, it sounds like a clock counting down. To what, you're not sure. And still, the rats move freely. You sit outside a shuttered tavern, listening to the bells, watching as one rat climbs a drain pipe and disappears into an attic window. Another follows. Far below the city, in the echoing dark of its sewers, their nests stretch on woven of hay, paper, cloth, crumbs, and secrets. No sound reaches there. No bell chimes. No incense curls. Just the quiet, relentless scurry of survival. It's market day, but the stalls are half empty. The usual chorus of haggling and laughter has thinned to whispers and shifty glances. No one wants to linger. A woman selling leeks swats at something under her cart. Another rat. The crowd watches it dart away, unconcerned. They've seen 100 just like it. Maybe more. You step into the town square, where a man in official robes is nailing a notice to a post. The parchment flutters in the wind. People gather around to read it, or for someone to read it aloud, since many can't. The town crier clears his throat and begins. It's a proclamation, a bold one. Let it be known that all refuse must be removed from public streets. Rats shall be declared a matter of civic concern. All homes must be inspected weekly by a sworn officer. Those who fail to comply will be fined. A pause. Someone in the crowd mutters, "That'll solve it, surely." Sarcasm. The only thing spreading faster than the plague. You hear similar proclamations echoed across Europe in these years. Florence demanded the cleaning of wells. Lubeck declared war on cellar trash. Paris issued a decree that anyone seen feeding a pigeon could be jailed, on the logic that if you feed pigeons, you might also be feeding rats. Historians still argue whether these public measures were more about appearances than impact. City councils wanted to look like they were doing something, even if their actions were too little, too late. You trail behind a sanitation officer, clipboard in hand. Well, a wooden tablet and a piece of charcoal, as he visits houses. He knocks, glances around briefly, asks 3 perfunctory questions, then moves on. His nose is bleeding slightly. He doesn't seem to notice. One house has a sign tacked to the door, "Cleaned by order." Beneath it, a smaller sign reads, "It came back anyway." The problem isn't effort, it's scale. How do you regulate a city that doesn't understand what's killing it? How do you manage a plague you can't see, caused by fleas you've never named, carried by rats you've tried to ignore? In Milan, they experimented with stricter rules. Anyone who reported a death had to isolate. Houses with plague signs were sealed, sometimes too well. One merchant's house was locked from the outside. A week later, neighbors complained of the smell. Inside, the entire family had perished, 2 from illness, 1 from thirst. A tragedy and a warning. You turn a corner and find another sign, hastily painted, "We are not sick, we have only mice." Below it, a rat has left droppings. The irony is almost too much. Back at City Hall, officials sit in a smoky room arguing over whose job it is to inspect the granaries. One claims the rats are God's judgment. Another wants to hire more catchers. A third recommends prayer. You leave before they can vote. Meanwhile, outside, 2 children chase a rat with a stick and a bucket. The rat wins. Again, it's not that the cities aren't trying. They are, desperately, but they're playing whack-a-mole with a hydra. Each public notice is met with skepticism. Each new rule brings confusion, and every enforcement seems a step behind. People adapt in stranger ways. Some wear charms, coins rubbed against tombstones, belts made of horsehair, rat skulls on twine. Others join processions, self-flagellating to drive out evil. One man sells jars of rat oil for healing. You don't ask what's in it. The city is drifting one public health decree at a time toward chaos disguised as order. The proclamation remains on the pole long after the crowd disperses. A breeze catches it, tears slightly, and from the shadows below the platform, a rat watches. No one notices. Not yet. You walk into a dark, wood-paneled room that smells faintly of lavender, ink, and something metallic. A physician's chambers, though in the 14th century that's a generous term. There are scrolls stacked precariously on shelves, a cracked skull on the desk for reference, and a bucket in the corner that no one's emptied in a while. On the cot lies a boy with a fever. His eyes flutter beneath closed lids. Beside him, the doctor mutters something in Latin, presses a hand to the boy's chest, then reaches for a leech jar. You've arrived at the front lines of medicine. The doctor wears a beaked mask stuffed with herbs, lavender, mint, rosemary, maybe a clove or 2. It makes him look like a tragic bird. He believes this filter will protect him from miasma, bad air that causes sickness. He's not entirely wrong, just not entirely right. The rats, of course, couldn't care less about miasma. They're after breadcrumbs. The physician bleeds the boy to balance the humors. Black bile, yellow bile, phlegm, and blood. Those were the 4 bodily fluids thought to control your health, mood, and fate. Rat bites didn't fit neatly into that theory, nor did buboes, coughing fits, or spontaneous fevers. Historians still argue whether medieval medicine helped or harmed more often. Some doctors observed patterns, plague spreading in certain neighborhoods, seasonal spikes. Others clung to rituals and relics. One Italian surgeon recommended garlic-infused wine for rat-associated illness. Another believed the key was rubbing onions on your temples and praying to Saint Roch. You watch as the doctor sets the leeches on the boy's arm. The leeches go to work. The boy groans. The rat beneath the cot. Yes, there's always one. Licks a crumb from the floor. Doctors were often powerless, so people got creative. You see a market stall selling bundles of herbs labeled plague chasers. Nearby, a woman hawks tiny cages meant to trap evil spirits that dwell in rodents. She doesn't explain what happens once you catch one. And then there were the homemade cures. You're invited into a house where a grandmother is boiling a strange soup of sage, mud, and dried fruit pits. To keep the rats out, she says proudly. No one eats it. They just leave it in corners like a stinky offering. Other families hang charms above their doors. Wooden carvings of cats, tiny wheels to confuse spirits, rat tails painted gold. One man buries pieces of silver around his house, claiming it creates a rodent-repelling barrier. Judging by the rat gnawing on his boot, the theory needs refinement. The most ambitious try architecture. You visit a manor where the Lord has built a rat moat, a shallow trench lined with water and rose thorns, circling his house like a muddy necklace. They'll never cross it, he says confidently. They already have. A servant points out where the rats used a plank and a piece of bacon to cross the trench like a bridge. You stare at her. They're clever, she says, almost admiringly. You leave before the Lord notices. In a workshop near the edge of town, a man shows you his invention. A rat trap the size of a chicken coop. It resets automatically, he claims. You peer inside. It's just a spinning stick with nails. Hasn't caught one yet, he admits. But it will. He winks. Back in the city center, a new decree is painted on the walls. All sick must remain indoors. Physicians must be notified of rat bites. Disobedience will be punished. It sounds serious. It even feels like progress. But beneath your feet, beneath the cobbles and floorboards, rats move freely. Their paths crisscross the city like invisible roads. Their nests stretch through sewers and crypts. Their fleas ride from fur to flesh, silent, unstoppable. And yet people hope. They take the garlic. They bless the thresholds. They burn the old straw. Because even in a time when nothing works, doing something feels better than doing nothing. As you step back into the alley, a rat watches you from a windowsill. In its mouth, a piece of dried rosemary, stolen, no doubt, from someone's anti-plague charm. You almost laugh. Almost. It starts with a whisper, then a kneel, then a full procession. You're walking through the lower quarter, past shuttered stalls and vinegar-washed doors, when you hear it, chanting, low and rhythmic. A line of people in brown robes rounds the corner, their feet bare, their backs striped red with fresh welts. Their flagellants, penitent pilgrims who believe the plague is punishment from God, and that their own pain might serve as atonement for everyone else's. They sing, whip themselves, and march in tight formation, a human metronome of misery. But look closer. Many of them wear small charms, stitched with whiskered shapes. Some clutch rat bones as talismans. Others murmur not only to saints, but to protectors you've never heard of. Welcome to the strange theology of the rat years. In an age when science faltered and doctors fumbled, people turned elsewhere. Folk belief blossomed like mold in a closed pantry. And rats? They slipped into myth as easily as they slipped into walls. You stop by a shrine just outside town. It's little more than a wooden board nailed to a tree, covered in ribbons and burnt candles. At its center is a carved rat, round-bellied, beady-eyed. Beneath it, someone has etched, "To the small watcher of plague." A woman beside you nods solemnly. "The spirits in them carry warnings," she whispers. "They don't cause it, they carry its mood." She offers the rat a boiled egg, gently placing it beside the roots. Historians still argue whether these practices were acts of fear or faith. Maybe both. Medieval cosmology left room for blurred lines between animal and omen, pest and protector. And where official religion failed to soothe, people invented saints of their own. Saint Gertrude of Nivelles becomes wildly popular during these years. She's already the patron of cats and gardeners, but now, mysteriously, people start associating her with rat control. Her iconography shifts. You spot an altar where she stands triumphantly atop a swarm of rats, smiling gently, flowers in hand. It's oddly comforting. You wander into a home where a child is tying knots in a red string, 7, exactly, and laying it in a circle around a bowl of milk. Her mother lights a candle, keeps them from crossing the threshold, she explains. Does it work? Not really. But again, doing something feels better than helplessness. One priest in Bruges begins preaching that rats are divine messengers, sent to test humility. Another calls them sin harvesters, who feed on spiritual decay. His sermons attract large crowds. And, eventually, rats. He blames the crowd. Others respond with satire. You find a pamphlet, badly illustrated, handwritten, titled The Rat's Revenge. It imagines a rat parliament beneath the city, assigning humans to be chewed in order of wickedness. The first name listed is the local tax collector. You suspect the author had a motive. You sit on a stoop as evening falls, watching a boy make chalk drawings on the wall. Not knights or saints, rats. Rows of them wearing little crowns, marching in lines. He's named them too. This one's King Crumb, he says. He's the smartest. Does King Crumb help or hurt people? You ask. He shrugs. Depends what they did. Strange. This blend of fear and familiarity. Rats are despised, but they're also ever-present. Too constant to fully hate. Too cunning to ignore. They sneak into myths, prayers, bedtime stories. One merchant sells tiny rat-shaped charms carved from soapstone. For luck, he says with a grin, or for curses. Depends how you wear it. The line between reverence and repulsion has worn thin. As the chants of the flagellants fade into the distance, you realize the city hasn't given up. It's just changed its tactics. If they can't kill the rats, they'll ritualize them, mythologize them, make meaning from misery. You glance down an alley. A rat stares back at you from atop a barrel. For a moment, you think it nods, and then it's gone. You wake to sunlight, rare, warm, a pleasant change from the usual low-hanging medieval fog. Feels like a reprieve. You walk west through the city gate and find yourself in a new neighborhood. The streets are wider here, the buildings taller, the residents slightly better dressed. There's even a little fountain, broken, of course, but still. And yet, rats. You watch one scamper across the stones, tail flicking, disappearing into a cracked cellar door. These streets may be neater, the windows glazed instead of shuttered, but the infestation doesn't care. Today, you're comparing cities not by name but by approach. Call them City A and City B. One chose strictness, the other indifference. In City A, they drafted ordinances, locked plague houses from the outside, inspected every barrel that entered the gate. City officials were seen daily in the streets, chalking doors and shouting new rules. The mayor even shaved his head and took up barefoot walks to symbolize humility before the pestilence. He also kept a cat, named it Bishop Fluffy. City B, on the other hand, did less. No inspections, no chalk doors. The plague cart came late and left early. Citizens were encouraged to pray and avoid touching things, which, while broadly good advice, lacked any teeth. A merchant here tells you they trust in natural immunity. I've had the sweating sickness twice, he says proudly. His lips are blue. You pass two houses side by side, divided only by a shared wall. One is sealed shut, a note pinned beside the door, by order of health guard, no entry. The other, wide open. A boy sits outside, feeding breadcrumbs to a pigeon. A rat waits in the bushes. Historians still debate whether stricter measures actually reduced mortality. Some say Milan's harsh lockdowns saved lives. Others argue that quarantine only works when enforced with consistency, and 14th-century cities rarely managed that. Most records are fragmentary. Many were burned, and rats, inconveniently, do not keep diaries. But you see the effects with your own eyes. City A is quiet, too quiet. People stay indoors. Commerce crawls. Fear hangs in the air like chimney smoke. But the alleys look cleaner. You see fewer rats in daylight. At night, though, the walls still rustle. City B? Busier. More carts, more shouting, more denial. There's a sort of desperate normalcy, as if pretending nothing's wrong might will the plague away. But the rats here are bold. You watch three climb a market stall like it's a playground. You slip into a tavern in each city. In the stricter one, the tables are set far apart. Everyone sips slowly, warily. Someone sneezes and three people leave. In the looser one, the place is packed. Fiddler plays. Two drunk men argue about whether plague comes from the moon or the Pope's bad breath. A rat scurries underfoot. No one flinches. The bartender shrugs. Better to die laughing than coughing, he says. then sneezes into his elbow. It's hard to say which approach is better. Or worse, they both have rats. They both have loss. They both have homes with empty cradles and untouched bread ovens. But one thing stands out. The rats adapt faster than the rules do. You walk the invisible line between City A and City B. It's marked not by a wall, but by an overgrown ditch where the rat tracks cross both ways. From one policy to the other, one theory to its opposite. And in that ditch there's a nest. Twigs, rags, straw. A curled-up rat sleeps there, fat and safe, right between control and chaos. You smile bitterly. The rats don't care if you quarantine. They don't care if you pray. They move between cities, houses, belief systems. They are the ultimate nonpartisan plague vector. You reach a hill that overlooks both districts. Smoke rises from chimneys. Bells toll again in the distance. Someone cries. Someone laughs. Somewhere below, rats chew quietly, unhindered. Two cities. Same story. Different costumes. You hear shouting before you see the crowd. Down in the marketplace, a group of merchants has gathered around a notice board. A city official, red-faced, perspiring, and a little too enthusiastic, is hammering up a fresh proclamation. He doesn't look comfortable. Maybe because the crowd is larger than usual. Or maybe because of the subject. You elbow your way forward. The paper reads, "Effective immediately. All owners of cats shall pay a vermin tax. No exceptions. No appeals." The murmurs turn to curses. You look around. Faces harden. One woman clutches her tabby as if it were a loaf of gold. Another man spits on the ground. They'll be charging us for brooms next. This is the moment it clicks. The city has just declared war on its best defense. The cat tax, perhaps well-meaning, perhaps just a new revenue grab, is a turning point. And you feel it in your bones. So do the rats. Historians still argue whether cat taxes were widespread or anecdotal. Records from northern Italy and parts of France show scattered attempts to register and tax pest-controlling animals, citing public hygiene concerns and economic fairness. But the consequences were often ironic and immediate, with fewer cats on the streets. Many given up, some quietly drowned, others smuggled out. The rat population surged. You head down a familiar lane and notice it's different now. The shadows are fuller. You see not just one rat, but three, for parade. They move with confidence, as if sensing that their old enemies have been retired. In one household, a boy weeps quietly into a cushion. "Father sold whiskers," he says. "Said the tax was too high." Behind him, you hear scratching in the walls. Not metaphorical. Soon, rat sightings are up. The grain store smells worse than usual. The cheese shop now closes early, not for lack of customers, but due to an unmanageable tail problem. You walk past a tavern that used to keep a stable of cats. There's a sign on the door now, "Closed for cleaning." Through the window, you catch a glimpse of the floor, moving, slightly. The city responds the way it always does, slowly and theatrically. They hire more rat catchers, double their pay, post new fines. But the damage is done. The balance has tipped. You overhear a rat catcher arguing with a magistrate. "You tax the cats. Now I need 3 more dogs and a cart full of traps just to clear one alley." The magistrate suggests more vinegar. The rat catcher swears, throws down his hat, and walks away. Some residents take matters into their own hands. You see one woman with a broom tied to a stick swatting at rafters. Another dangles garlic braids from her windows. A man tries training a rooster to chase rats. It fails, spectacularly. And the cats? Well, some survive. Hidden in basements, kept as ornamental companions by wealthier families. One priest in a hilltop abbey adopts 6, claiming they protect the sacred wine. His sermons become very popular. But citywide, the tide is turning. Rats now move openly. You see them sunning themselves on stone steps, napping in empty wagons. One even chews through a proclamation nailed to a gatepost. A small, perfect circle of paper disappears into its mouth. The irony is bitter and widespread. You pass a mural being painted over. It once depicted St. Gertrude, surrounded by cats and smiling. Now, it's been replaced with a neutral shield and the city's motto. The rats do not notice. Or maybe they do and they celebrate. One night, you hear distant music from the alley behind the spice shop. You follow it, thinking maybe the tavern is back in business. Instead, you find a circle of rats. Dozens. They're not dancing, of course. Not really. But they move with purpose, gnawing, scattering, squeaking in sync. Feels rehearsed. Triumphant. A cat tax, you think. What a gift. You retreat quietly. You're sitting on the city wall just before dawn, watching the streets stretch out below like a tangle of roots. Narrow alleys, crooked chimneys, half-finished repairs, a new pile of refuse in a place that was cleaned only yesterday. Everything looks calm in the early light, but you know better. Below, something scurries from a baker's doorway. Then another. Then 5. Then 10. The rat parade never really ends. It just takes breaks when humans are watching. At this point, even the most optimistic citizens have stopped asking if rats are the problem. Now they're asking something much more uncomfortable. Are we just not smart enough to beat them? Because here's the truth, whispered in taverns, scribbled in the margins of merchant ledgers, muttered by street sweepers and scribes alike. The rats are winning. You head to the scribes' hall, where a handful of city officials sit hunched over documents. They're trying to make sense of it all, drawing lines on parchment, marking outbreaks, counting deaths, issuing more rules. One of them sighs deeply, dips his quill and writes, Order 119. No open grain storage. The rat beneath his desk yawns. Historians still argue whether medieval cities ever stood a real chance against rats. The tools were primitive, the science misunderstood, and the rats, fast, social, shockingly adaptive, were always one step ahead. Some officials blamed fate, others blamed foreigners, but a few began to wonder, maybe the rats weren't simply thriving in spite of us. Maybe they were thriving because of us. You sit with a merchant in the spice quarter. He used to laugh off the infestation. What's one rat, he'd say. Now he just shakes his head. They learn. I saw one wedge a cobblestone loose to reach my cellar door. You nod. You've seen worse. One baker built his shelves higher, only to find the rats climbing the walls. A tailor started sewing cinnamon into his linens. The rats ate around the stitching. A mason swore he sealed every crack, then watched a rat climb in through his chimney. It's not just numbers anymore. It's method, memory. Rats avoid traps that killed their kin. They seek out soft places, know where the garbage piles are richest, where the dogs are lazy, where the humans sleep deeply. One woman swears a rat knocked over a cup of water to put out a candle. Is it true? Who knows? But it feels true. You stroll through the cemetery, not for reflection, but because it's quieter. Or was. Even here, the little tunnels crisscross under moss and stone. Someone has begun burying the dead in thicker cloth, hoping to keep them out. You know who them is. At a monastery on the edge of town, the friars have begun charting rat sightings. They mark maps with tiny ink dots. One chart shows a perfect circle of movement around the grain store, expanding week by week. It looks like a ripple on a pond. Or a siege. One friar says softly, It's like they're testing our defenses. You don't disagree. In some houses, people no longer sleep in beds, they hang hammocks from beams. Others place their food in metal pots suspended from ceilings. A few keep dogs inside at all times, not as pets but as security. Still, the rats come, and in a strange way you begin to respect them. Not admire exactly, but you see their brilliance. These dirty little creatures, outmaneuvering one of the most complex systems humanity has ever built. The city. They don't govern. They don't argue. They don't post decrees or light incense or quarantine ships. They just adapt. They never ask why, only how. You return home at dusk and light a candle. The shadows on the wall dance. You hear it behind the plaster, beneath the floorboards, inside the eaves. The quiet scratching. They're still there. Always. It's late now. The streets have emptied. The bell towers fall silent. Windows are shuttered tight against the rising wind, and even the dogs, those noble last defenders of breadcrumbs and bones, have curled into sleep. You walk alone. The city is hushed, but not peaceful. Never peaceful. It's the quiet of exhaustion. Of a town that has tried everything and run out of ideas. A city that has burned its sickbeds, taxed its cats, quarantined its neighbors, and still finds itself gnawed from within. You move past familiar corners, some cleaner, some more ragged. You see a building that was sealed last week now open again. The door sways gently in the wind. A lantern flickers inside. The rats have likely already returned. It's not defeat exactly, just acceptance. You find yourself back in the old square, now littered with more proclamations than pigeons. One half-burnt parchment reads, "All grain to be triple inspected." Another says, "No waste to be thrown after vespers." Someone has scribbled beneath that, "It never mattered anyway." A figure leans against a post, a tired rat catcher, pipe in hand, his coat patched with what looks suspiciously like bite marks. "They're not beasts," he mutters. "They're us, only better at hiding." You believe him. You make one last loop through the city before rest. You see the bones of broken traps, herb bundles turned brown, prayer candles that have long gone cold, a cathedral door slightly ajar, where incense no longer burns. But even here, in this moment of near stillness, the signs remain. A ripple in a puddle, a squeak in a gutter, a flicker of motion under a woodpile. You follow it, slowly, until you come to a wall with a faint path worn through the dirt. Paw prints, tiny, dozens of them, winding like a trail of ink across parchment. The same trails that run through homes, under markets, around courtyards, and through city gates. And somewhere in the dark, the rats pause too. Maybe not in triumph, but in permanence. Because you've seen it now. All the fires, laws, prayers, and poisons. You've seen people plan, plead, purge, and still the scratch at the wall returns. It's not a war anymore. It's a pattern, a dance. And as you sit on your stoop beneath the stars, the wind cool against your face, you feel the rhythm slow, the story fade, the movements settle. The rats will always be here. But for now, you can sleep. Let your breath slow. Feel the ground beneath you. The old cobblestones, warm from the day's sun and now gently cooling beneath the hush of night. The city rests, and so do you. The distant sound of bells has faded. The smoke has cleared. The torches dim. You've walked every alley, peered into every shadow, followed every trail of whiskers and wonder. And now there's only the quiet. Even the rats have stilled. Somewhere below the boards, they nestle into rags and straw, their tiny bodies curled into silence. The city sighs, tired of the fight, but not angry. Just still, just waiting for tomorrow, as it always does. You've seen it all now. The chaos, the hope, the strange charm of a world always trying to tidy up what cannot be tamed. And in that effort, however fruitless, is something kind, something human. So close your eyes. Let the clamor of wagons and whispers fall behind you. Let the scraping at the wall become a lullaby. Let the wind through the rooftops hum a quiet song. A song of survival, absurdity, and strange resilience. Tonight, no one's chasing. Nothing needs solving. The rats will run, the candles will flicker, and the city will turn gently in its sleep. And you rest, because you've walked long and watched closely, because you've made peace with the scurry and the silence, because even in the rustle of straw and the squeak in the dark, there's calm. Now breathe, slow, still. Good night.